morning. Coming to you live from Florida, it's the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Vero Beach. Welcome to everyone sitting here, and welcome to you out in Zoom land. My name is Paul Amaru. I am a white senior citizen with gray curly hair, bifocal glasses. I'm wearing a very colorful Hawaiian-themed shirt, and I answer to the pronouns he, him, his, and hey you. I serve our congregation this morning as pulpit host for our minister, Reverend Dr. Roger Ray. Reverend Roger came to us in October of 2023 after retirement from his ministry in Missouri, the Show Me State. He holds Master of Divinity and Doctor of Ministry degrees from Vanderbilt and was a fellow at Harvard University. He is the author of several books, including Meditations and Progressive Faith and Practice. Reverend Roger Ray will lead a new covenant group this fall. Talk to him after services for more details. Please welcome Reverend Roger Ray to our pulpit. We welcome you in the fullness of your age, race, ethnicity, your way of being in body and mind, your gender expression, sexual orientation, and religious background. Whether you have a PhD, a GED, or no D at all, may you know that here, each of you contributes in your own way to the beauty of the whole. Reverend Tom asks pulpit hosts to say a few words as to why we're used. I joined the Unitarian Universalists 22 years ago because I was seeking a spiritual home, one that embraces diversity, open-mindedness, and justice. A home where questions are welcomed, not shunned, where belief is not dictated, but explored. In our world that is defined by rigid ideologies, I found peace in a tradition that values both personal, spiritual growth and collective responsibility. Well, I hope you will join us for coffee and fellowship after the service in Fellowship Hall. If you are new to our fellowship, please take a red mug so we can greet you warmly while you drink our fair trade coffee and tea. Today's announcements are in our bulletin, so now let us turn our minds and hearts to worship, our introit.
Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me with all of our voices and all of our visions? Friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
Join me in reciting the chalice words as Reverend Roger lights the chalice. We light this chalice to remind us that our faith does not live apart from the world, but moves within it, in the choices we make, in the leaders we hold accountable, in the dreams we pursue together. May this light call us to courage as we engage in the public square remembering that our faith compels us to build a world where all can flourish.
Please join us for our opening hymn, When We Come to Disagree. Rise as you are willing and able.
Good morning. Keeping with tradition, for those that are vision impaired, I'm a rather senior citizen, a corpulent cleric, one might say, but that would be rude. Wearing a black suit, so kind of think Santa Claus and Batman sort of mashed up together. I use pronouns of he and him, but my university students always know that saying sir might lead to better credit. So you make your choices. I want to share a story with you that I heard the late Fred Craddock deliver at a preacher's conference in Texas 45 years ago, I'm afraid to say. He told a story about a little boy named Jimmy who lived in a small town in Texas. And where they lived in this little town, it just so happened that all of his neighbors were black. And so Jimmy's playmates were black, which back then made his parents a little uncomfortable, but kids are kids, they're going to play, so that's what you do. They just didn't comment on it. The unique thing about Jimmy was that he, unlike my own memories of being drugged to church, he loved church. He loved the stained glass windows. He loved the way when the pipe organ played that the old oak pews would vibrate. He loved women in hats and gloves. And he loved even when the preacher's face got all sweaty and red when he got tuned up in his sermon. But the thing that bothered him was his little friends could never come with him. And so it came up at lunch almost every Sunday after church. Daddy, why can't my friends come with me? Hush up, son. Just not done. But Daddy, can't they come just once? No, son. I'll let you know. Eat your lunch. So every Sunday, this came up over and over and over again. And one week, there was a death in the church. And whenever the church doors were unlocked, Jimmy was there. So Jimmy went to the funeral. And there were a lot of people there that he didn't know, that didn't normally go to their church. So he kept hoping, but still his friends weren't there. And so when the funeral was over, that night at dinner, he said, Daddy, when I die, can my friends come to my funeral? Son, you're not going to die. But Daddy, I just want to know, when I have my funeral, can my friends come to my funeral? Well, I reckon, but you're upsetting your mom. Just eat your peas. Nobody knew if it was on purpose or if it was an accident when Jimmy ran out in front of that truck. The town was in shock. And 3 days later, they had the funeral. And lo and behold, the church was full, but right on the front pew were all of Jimmy's friends. And the preacher stood to speak, and he said, I don't know. I don't know if it was an accident. I don't know if he did it on purpose. The only thing I really know is that this town only had one prophet, and now he's dead. Folks, we live in a time that's really short of prophets. And I apologize for telling a martyr story, but I think the situation is grim. We are at a time of great social upheaval and change, mostly change backwards. Things that we fought for when I was a teenager, and that was a long time ago, are being taken away. Trans soldiers have been told that they need to pack up their stuff and get out of the military. Women had their right to govern their own reproductive lives taken away from them after 50 years. And at least one Supreme Court justice is on the record saying that he wants to take away the right of same-sex couples to be married. I don't know how many prophets we've got in this town, but we sure do need some. So when you greet one another this morning, see if you can encourage one another to be the voice of the voiceless.
Thinking about what he said. Well, now it's time for us to greet one another. So take a moment to welcome one another with a smile, a fist bump. Remind ourselves we are one family in fellowship. Let us come back together and turn our hearts in friendship. the ritual of stones and water. As Reverend Ray puts the stones in the water, let us remember Bonnie Shelton, a respected member of many years, who just died a few days ago of an aortic aneurysm. She wrote our newsletter for many, many years and wrote it so well. She retired from that last fall. A woman of many talents who will be fondly remembered as a valuable member of our UU family. When you feel comfortable in coming up and putting a stone in the water, Reverend Roger will put one in for whoever raises their hand.
19th century evangelist Alexander Campbell, an Irish immigrant to the United States, said that if anyone will kneel in prayer for something that they will not then stand up and go to work, they are simply disappointing themselves and insulting God. I'm not always big on symbolic rituals, but if the ritual leads you to change your behavior, not just putting a stone in water, but making a resolve that whatever it is that you are thinking about, holding in the light, whatever it is, whoever it is, about which you are concerned, if that leads you to leave here with greater conviction, to take a meal to them, to reach out with a phone call, to do something to assist someone who's sick, that turns a dead ritual into a living act of love. So I encourage you to think about what it is you're doing when you participate in this ritual. Before us we have water, which is, of course, the very sustenance of life. That's why a lot of us are here. We want to go sit by the water, right? We have a feeling, it's like the mother's womb, that you are calmed in the presence of water. It buoys us up. But we add to this water just a pinch of salt to be aware that, especially with Bonnie Shelton's death, but with other events going on in our lives, we've shed some tears. We have some things that we're sad about. But it's important at the same time to add some flowers, because life doesn't always suck. Sometimes there's things that we want to celebrate, that we're happy about, and we should be just as encouraged to come and put a stone in the water out of thankfulness as out of fear or out of concern. So if you would like for me to put a rock in the water for you, if you'll just hold your hand up, I'll do that. 2, 3. Now, if you are so inspired, please come and place a stone in the water. I've done a lot of research on fundraising within churches and studying across the religious horizon. You know which denomination has the lowest per average donations to a church? Us, Unitarians. But you know, among us, there's not very many people that are scared of going to hell, right? And very few of us maintain any lust in our hearts for palaces in the clouds and eternal reward. When we donate to a church like this, we're donating because we want there to be an honest prophetic voice in the world, in a world where there's not very many prophetic voices. So our donations, particularly this Sunday's donation, even the loose offering, goes to support the work done by this congregation. This church does a lot of good work. Some of it is a gesture towards justice. I was just hearing about a 20-acre farm outside of town where volunteers grow food to give to the poor. What an undertaking. 20 acres is a lot. If you've ever maintained a vegetable garden, a quarter of an acre is a full-time job. So an awful lot of people are doing a lot to directly donate food to those that are food insecure. But if you've been sweating in the field and pulling bugs off of heads of lettuce, you're not likely to vote in favor of a billionaire bailout that takes away SNAP for other people. We sharpen our compassion by our practices of generosity. So I encourage you today to support this church, this fellowship, and to support the work of UUs all over the country and around the globe. I realize Reverend Tom usually leads us in a silent meditation, but I'm a wordy sort of guy. So I'm going to ask you to meditate with me in the words of this meditation that are printed in your bulletin, and probably also on the signs, yes. We echo the sentiments of the poet who said that we are lovers in a dangerous time. Though we seek to build community through radical compassion, We see our world deeply divided by partisan interests and the kind of self-seeking that kills love before it can grow. May we then, with both courage and commitment, learn to be seekers of fully realized love in the midst of a world defined by isolation and half-hearted commitments. Amen. Thank you, Elizabeth and ensemble. And as music goes, also thank you to the tech crew who turns off my microphone while we're singing. It is an act of grace for all of us. Back in the good old days, when even state universities had a budget for inviting famous speakers to campus to expose their young audience to influential thinkers, Western Kentucky University, where I was a freshman in 1974, hosted William Buckley, the famous conservative from Firing Line on TV and the originator of the National Review. So he spoke to about 3,000 students, teenagers from rural Kentucky. I was 18, and though I had never watched Firing Line nor picked up a copy of the National Review, I had heard his name and I was there. He didn't talk about his recent trip to China with President Nixon when those Two global powers were finally starting to talk to each other. He didn't rail against liberals, gays, hippies, as he did on Firing Line so often, but he actually gave us a talk about trying to lead a meaningful life. I remember two things that he said that evening. The first was that he had absolutely no respect for anyone that slept more than 5 hours a day. The other was more useful. He said, "You have been warned not to talk about either politics or religion in a polite society." But the problem with following that advice is that you will never learn how to talk about politics or religion in polite society. And those are important topics, and we should learn how to talk about them kindly, patiently, and rationally. Now, those were the days when Republicans and Democrat members of Congress could publicly debate about the civil rights movement, desegregation, voters' rights, the Equal Rights Amendment, abortion, but at the end of the day, they would collect their children and spouses, and everyone got together for an ice cream social. In the 1980s, Democratic House Speaker Tip O'Neill and conservative icon Ronald Reagan had a pact that they were friends after 6 p.m. A correspondent once brought this up to President Obama, suggesting that maybe he should get a drink with Mitch McConnell, to which Obama replied, "Why don't you get a drink with Mitch McConnell?" I get it. I wouldn't want to spend happy hour with Mitch McConnell or Donald Trump, or if it were even possible, Ronald Reagan. But I know that somehow we have to get back to a place where we can sit down at a Thanksgiving table and have a polite and meaningful conversation about politics and religion at a table where people don't agree, but where they can come to at least understand one another better. This week, if you pay much attention to the news, you have heard our president say boldly to loud applause that he hates Democrats, really hates Democrats. For many years, Americans have elected their presidents with just a 51% majority, and sometimes 51% is described as a landslide. But previously, presidents would assure the public that they would be the president for those who voted for them and for those who didn't. We only have one president at a time, so the president is president for all the people. But now we have reached such an extreme of division that a president, and he didn't just say it once, he was on a victory tour for the passage of his favorite bill, and he repeated it over and over to thunderous applause. This is an extreme that cannot be sustained. This cannot last. It's unsurvivable. Once public discourse becomes laden with angry accusations, hyperbole, name-calling, and dismissive characterizations, people will actually tend to become more devoted to their rather radical extremes rather than being shamed or bullied into changing. They tend to deepen their devotion to increasingly radical viewpoints. We Unitarians are fond of saying that love is my religion, which would be wonderful if it was generally true. But I'm afraid that all too often, the larger truth may be that acquiescence is our religion. We don't talk about religion and politics with people who disagree with us. We try to avoid potentially controversial conversations because we want to avoid conflict. I don't know if you get a merit badge for that. But I get it. There are times to just walk away to avoid starting an argument for which there is no meaningful end. But seriously, if you keep peace without mutual understanding, is that peace or is that just surrender? or indifference? Let me suggest a thought exercise. It is a broadly known fact that 32 of 33 Western democracies have universal health care. The United States is the only country in that club that does not, and yet we spend more per capita on health care than any other nation in the world, and our outcomes do not match our financial commitment. In fact, in most objective analyses, healthcare outcomes in the United States are near the bottom, while our expenditures are right at the absolute top. So let's imagine ourselves at a big family Thanksgiving dinner, and the subject of universal healthcare comes up. I'm going to insist that sick people need access to healthcare. Whether it's free or affordable, the point is that everyone needs access to healthcare. But how do we achieve that goal? The answer has eluded us. For 100 years, we've been trying to get to universal health care, but America has never been able to wrestle that pig to the ground. Now, Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have staked out the position that we should have universal Medicare, remove age restrictions, and everyone gets Medicare. So predictably, someone at your Thanksgiving table, if your Thanksgiving feast is anything like mine usually are, someone would quickly say that Bernie and AOC are crazy, or they are communists or radicals. But rather than responding to that, can you imagine simply asking, how would you like to see us get to universal health care? Now, they're probably not going to have an answer right away because conservatives are not used to liberals listening to them. So you would catch them off guard. Now, if someone says that they are satisfied with their health insurance and they don't care if 30 million Americans don't have access to health care, in grad school we called that a sociopath. If you don't care, there might not be a point of conversation. There's not common ground with people that are willing to restrict access to health care to people who are sick. But honestly, if there is a solution that is some combination of private insurance or a separate system of government-run hospital access, rather than just shrugging our shoulders at the inevitability of a billionaire bailout, what if we could start a conversation about how to get to universal health care? And if work is a requirement, then how do we get to universal employment? I don't know if you've traveled in Western Europe very much, but when you travel in Western Europe, particularly Denmark, which is often held up as an example, there's no beggars on the street. There's no waiting for access to health care. They have a higher tax rate, but they have figured it out. Most countries, while everybody complains about their health care, it's not like we don't have death panels here, right? I mean, mine is called United Healthcare, but yours might be called Blue Cross Blue Shield. We have death panels in the United States. So how do we get to the point of having universal health care? If Bernie and AOC are crazy, what's your sane plan? Conservatives would have to work on that. We've been promised that they would remove and replace Obamacare, but we've never seen the replacement. But I want to see it. Could we start a conversation in which we encourage people to tell us what their real answer is? But let me show you an issue about communication. This is just an exercise, but I'm going to say a sentence, and I would like for you to say it back to me in unison, okay? Du bist meine Angel, ich bin wachsen deine Hand. It's a simple sentence, but because I said it in German, unless you speak German, it probably didn't leave any muddy footprints on the clean wax floor of your mind. But let's try it again. You are my angel, I am but wax in your hands. I don't speak German either, but there's a reason why I memorized that sentence, but that is none of your business. But it isn't hard to remember a sentence in a familiar language. It is almost impossible if there's not categories in your brain for the concepts that you hear in a foreign language. When conservatives and liberals try to talk about the serious problems in life, we oftentimes simply don't have the categories in our brain to understand what the other person is saying. It takes practice. It takes work. I don't sit and listen to Fox News for 12 hours a day. I might listen to MSNBC for 12 hours a day. But the people who do that have a lot of difficulty bridging the gap to understand the person on the other side of the issue. I'm suggesting that at least a part of the solution to the partisan divide in our country, the divide that is literally tearing our country apart, is polite conversation about important topics. But we have to try to find some common language, or to create it, to create common ground where we can discuss these things, especially to discuss important issues with someone with whom we dramatically disagree. I think that a huge problem about discussing religion and politics in polite society is that we are not very clear about what we mean about either word. I've been preaching for 45 years now. Not today, it may feel like it, but for a long time I've been preaching. And I'm often accused of preaching too much about politics. But anyone who has ever accused me of that simply did not agree with what I was saying. What's politics in church? It's when you say something I didn't want you to say. If you say something I like, preach it. But if you say something I don't, then we start to divide around it. If I say as a person of faith that empathy and compassion are core aspects of religion, and therefore I believe in universal health care, then the only people who would say that I'm talking about politics would be people who don't think we should have universal health care. So the word politics, when it is used pejoratively, just means I disagree with what you said, and I don't think you should be allowed to say it. And in my career experience, that was often followed up with a meeting that I'd be fired. I disagree with what you said, so I'm going to keep you from saying it again. I want you to learn how to say it in a way that invites dialogue and not just cuts it off or draws a line in the sand. Maybe we get to universal health care through insurance companies, and maybe we get there through a public option. Maybe it's a blending of the two. But if you just want 30 million people to not have health care, don't try to date my daughter. I get so angry when those fundraising ads come on TV from Shriners Hospitals and St. Jude's. And both institutions do very laudable work. But we have to trot out little kids with cancer or grievous birth defects to beg for money for them to get health care. You don't see those ads in Japan or in France or Germany, not even in Russia, not in poor countries like Thailand or Nicaragua or Mexico, because in those countries they know that if a kid has cancer, they need health care. If they can't walk, they need some kind of prosthetic help. They don't trot them out like circus ponies to get donations from TV viewers. I believe that Americans are better than this. I just want to know what's standing in the way of our greater humanity. Not all conversations are worth having. I'm not going to give much time to anyone who's convinced that Democrats are running a pedophile ring out of the basement of a DC pizza parlor. And just because you have a civil relationship to offer to someone doesn't mean that they've got a civil relationship to offer to you. But one thing is certain, if we avoid talking about the hard stuff, no one ever learns. No one ever changes. And in that dynamic, we all fail. Let me try a completely different illustration before I leave you. In a plea deal, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has been released from a British prison where he had served nearly 6 years after having spent a decade avoiding arrest by living in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. There are those who believe that Assange was a hero of journalism, of free speech, and others who believe that he was guilty of some of the worst espionage crimes of this century. I've been in conversations where the mere mention of his name divided the room into adamant factions. The relevant question in his case is not whether he's a really great guy or not. I don't know anybody that wants to carry the banner of Julian Assange being a wonderful person, and he certainly can't be my daughter. But in the process of releasing stolen documents, was that a journalistic coup exposing war crimes committed by the American government? Or did it simply place secret agents and military secrets at tremendous risk? Because he did both of those things, didn't he? Which is more important? Exposing Obama administration's refusal to prosecute soldiers who murdered journalists and first responders on a battlefield in Afghanistan, or leaking information that could expose undercover sources? Chelsea Manning, who provided the information to WikiLeaks, and Assange have both served years in prison for this leak. But the soldiers who murdered those journalists and medics were never punished. And for that matter, the New York Times and the several British and European news sources that published the leaked material, they were not charged with any crime. How can Manning and Assange be guilty and the media gets a free pass? Now, I could argue either side of this issue, though you might guess that I lean towards supporting leaking information about war crimes in order to hold our government or any other government honest. But to that point, these 3 bronze statues of Assange, Manning, along with Edward Snowden, have been erected in Berlin in praise of their courage, because Germans know a little bit about the danger of allowing a government to operate in secrecy under a cover of propaganda. I've heard a number of people I really like get very mad about this issue, but what I have never heard was a civil conversation among people who had an honest disagreement. That's a conversation that I would like to be a part of. Any attempt at discussing the facts becomes a partisan condemnation of either the leakers or the government. There's an anonymous modern proverb that I really love that says we can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark, but the real tragedy is when adults are afraid of the light. The internet will repeatedly tell you that that's a quote from Socrates or Plato, but I can tell you, with the strength of my degree in Greek philosophy, they didn't say anything like that. But it doesn't really need to be attributed to a famous Greek philosopher. It's just true. We can understand a child being afraid of the dark, but an adult who's afraid of the light, that's a problem. The reason we could never get some cases to trial is the same as the reason we can't have a civil conversation about some controversial topics. It's because someone is afraid of the light. That, I contend, is shameful. I wrote a weekly newspaper column for Springfield, Missouri for about 25 years. And during that 25 years, various publishers called me in for a Come to Jesus meeting because I had written a column that they thought was controversial. And we had lots of different publishers over those 25 years, but I said to every one of them, anytime you write something that no one objects to, that's advertising. Journalism happens when you write something that a significant number of readers disagree with. Now, I cannot claim that I'm always right. In fact, I disagree with a lot of what I used to say. But I can claim that I've always been honest. And if a church is not willing to be exposed to an honest exploration of matters of ethics, who wants to attend a church that's afraid of the light? When I moved here a year and a half ago, I knew I was moving from a very red state to a very red state. So the first week I was in town, I came here because I wanted to sit in a room for at least an hour in this deeply red state, surrounded by people who largely see the world as I do. I also need to feel that I'm not alone in the world. Still, it just might be that the most important messages you hear are the ones in which you had to endure a difference of opinion. Don't only seek confirmation of bias. For an hour a week, I'm looking for confirmation of bias, but don't only seek that. Remain willing to step into the light and heat of honest disagreement on important topics, because the only way out of our current dangerous political and ideological quagmire is to engage one another in the light of honest dialogue. My favorite British philosopher, Bertrand Russell, left us with this hope. He said, "I allow myself to hope that the world will emerge from its present troubles, that it will one day learn to give the direction of its affairs, not to the cruel swindlers and scoundrels, but to people possessed of wisdom and courage." I suggest that we also give ourselves to that hope. America's democracy is seriously in danger of giving way to oligarchy or fascism because of our deep partisan divide. If we hope to remove cruel swindlers and scoundrels from power, we have to value wisdom and courage. So here's a challenge for you. Celebrate this Independence Day weekend by having a civil conversation with a MAGA supporter. I wish you good luck.
Number 159. Rise as you are willing and able.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and wide. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and vine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
I encourage you now to go in peace, to love and serve one another and the greater world. May peace be with you as you go.